Welcome, everybody. I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. That was Popularity Parade, which was a great film strip. I love showing film strips, and when I do this live, I show film strips, and I have the audience actually read them aloud, just to kind of get us into that mindset. And I don't think people read aloud enough. Once you get past grade school, there's not a whole lot of reading aloud. Anyway, so today is the special day in that we will be showing our 1000th film. And it's a special one. Well, special, I don't know. But before we get started with that, here's a film about machines.
Bob is starting out early this morning for a bicycle trip. Brother Bob can't ride a bicycle, so he has to stay home, but he runs up the street with him anyway. No use running, he'll never keep up with the boys. Around the corner and away they go. How can they move so much faster on a bicycle and still not work so hard as Bob when he runs? The Rangers are using simple machines to help them move faster and easier. Machines are helpers, and they make hard jobs easier for us to do. The bicycle uses several simple machines working together. One of these is called the wheel and axle. The steering wheel in an automobile is a wheel and axle too. It is fastened to a long rod that runs down to the front wheels. It's much easier to turn the rim of this big steering wheel than to try to turn the small rod in the center. Wheel and axle machines make our work much easier. A doorknob is a wheel and axle. The pencil sharpener is another wheel and axle machine. By turning the handle in a circle like a wheel, you are making the axle move the blades that sharpen your pencil. When we want to lift things higher than our heads, we can do it by pulling down on a rope that is running up over a pulley. Every morning when the flag is raised on the flagpole at school, a pulley is used to lift it to the top. The pulley is another kind of simple machine that helps make work easier. Here's a pulley that helps build a house. The man on the roof needs more tar, so his helper down on the ground hooks a pail of the heavy tar onto a rope, then pulls on the end to send the bucket up to the man on the roof. Their work is made much easier by the pulley. Pulleys can help mother, too. Apartment houses sometimes have wash line pulleys so that people upstairs do not have to come down to the backyard to hang their wash. The line runs around the pulley and can be moved out into the air. The cable on back of a tow truck that lifts the front end of a car off the street is going over pulleys. When the man starts the motor, the cable runs around these pulleys and winds onto a big wheel. The job of lifting a heavy object becomes easier when we use one or more simple pulleys. A lever is another kind of simple machine that helps make our work easier. By pushing down on the long end of the bar, this man can make the short end lift the nails and the lid from the box with very little work. A hammer is a lever. So is a broom, a baseball bat, a crowbar, Out in the country, the rangers stop at a wayside park for a refreshing drink of water. The handle of the pump is a simple machine that lifts the water from beneath the earth. It, too, is a lever. By pushing down on the long end of the handle, the boy can make the short end lift the rod that brings the water up into the pump. A lever is a bar that moves back and forth on a fixed point and helps us do things with less work. A flat surface is called a plane. A sloping surface is called an inclined plane, and this is another kind of simple machine. This man rolling a barrel up a plank to get it onto a truck is using an inclined plane. It would be very hard work to lift the barrel straight up from the street to the truck, but by using a sloping surface and pushing it a little farther, the man can do the job much easier. A stairway is an inclined plane also, for it lets you go to an upper floor with very little effort. The rangers have come to the big hill, and making a bicycle go up the road is hard work. But see how much harder it would be to try to ride the bicycle straight up the side of the hill. The road is built along a gradual slope, so that people can travel to the top easier by going a little farther around on an inclined plane. This ranger is trying to drive a stake into the ground. He's having trouble because the end of the stick is flat. When he takes a knife and cuts 2 angles on the end of the stick, he can drive it into the ground with very little trouble. The end of the stick has been made into a wedge. A wedge is another kind of simple machine that helps make our work easier. The knife itself is a wedge, with one edge very thin for cutting and the other edge thick. An axe is a wedge, too. Even the end of a nail or tack is a wedge, for it comes to a point and so makes it easier to drive into wood. A plow is a wedge also, for as the tractor pulls it forward in the field, the thin edge cuts into the earth and puts it aside. The rangers have met a man whose car has a flat tire. He is raising a corner of the car with a screw jack so that he can change the wheels. With the screw jack, this man is lifting a very heavy weight with very little work. And so we have come upon another simple machine, the screw, that helps do our work easier. The screw is really an inclined plane that winds round and round up a bar. The man is making the screw move by turning a handle. As the screw turns, it rises slowly and lifts the heavy car that is resting on top of it. The airplane propeller is a screw also. It pulls the plane across the sky. The bolt that holds the wheel onto the frame of the bicycle is a screw. The screw in a vise holds things together too. So does the screw cap on a jar of fruit. All machines are one or another of only 6 different kinds: the wheel and axle, the lever, the pulley, the inclined plane, the wedge, and the screw. They help push, pull, or move things from one place to another. All machines, from the lawnmower to the railroad engine, use one or more of these 6 kinds of simple helpers. Even our playground slide is a machine, an inclined plane. Your roller skates are mostly wheel and axle. Every day we use simple machines in our work or play. And every day they are doing things for us to make living easier and simpler.
I like that camera art pictures. I'm sure that this was probably not a professional educational film producer. It was potentially someone who was a hobbyist or somebody who was doing like commercials or some sort of industrial filmmaking, and they kind of dipped their toe into making an educational film. And that would happen a lot. And I have a series of journals called Educational Screen that were made from the 20s up to the 70s. And there would always be these little tiny ads in there for, learn about physics with machines. It'd be this, basically somebody could take out an ad and advertise. And, this journal was received by librarians and AV technicians and various folks, and they would see this, school boards see this and say, oh, well, we need this for our curriculum, and then they would buy it. And so there's lots of examples of amateur turned professional educational filmmakers who were basically shooting home movies or shooting their own little amateur films, and then they would shoot something and then make it. So Emily Frith is an example of that, a woman who used home movie equipment, shot her family, and then edited with narration about a wide variety of different things. So it's kind of interesting. Sid Labyrinth also did that too. All right, this next film number 999, shows us what a giant pain in the butt it is to be in space. And this is something to kind of think about. I just saw the Dragon, the Falcon X launch. My wife and I watched it last week, or week before last. But basically seeing what had to happen for them to launch and orbit and dock. And what was really fascinating was the instrumentation, the suits that they were wearing. All these things seemed very, very easy and luxurious and kind of space high-tech-y compared to, basically addressing the same problems that we always face with going into space. So here's First Men into Space. My favorite scene of this is the one where they are basically lowering the air pressure or increasing the amount of carbon dioxide and seeing what happens to some test pilots. So here's First Men into Space.
For ages, man gazing with wonderment at the... But only by 1961 had rocket power developed to a point where he could actually... Now man faced a serious question. How could he survive in this virtually unknown environment? To fully understand the problem, artificial satellites explored the conditions of space which man would encounter, while ground laboratories investigated the problems of man's survival in space. We shall study some of these and their solutions. We begin with air. Like all matter, air is composed of atoms and molecules shown here as spheres. Those nearer the ground are pressed together by the weight of the trillions above them, progressively denser and heavier. A column of air, 1 inch square, and the height of Earth's atmosphere weighs about 15 pounds. This is why air normally exerts a pressure of 15 pounds on every square inch of our bodies at sea level. As we go higher, there are fewer and fewer air particles above us. Hence, the weight and pressure of air decreases. 5 miles up, air pressure is only 5 pounds per square inch. The air pressure inside this testing chamber quickly drops below 5 pounds per square inch when the membrane is broken. Note how the liquid in the beaker bubbles. For at low air pressure, gases dissolved in a liquid are released as bubbles. Without protection, the man's body fluids would bubble. Because air in the lungs is also sucked out, this would be fatal. Another danger in a space vehicle is the accumulation of carbon dioxide, the gas exhaled in breathing. The man becomes groggy when 4% of the air is composed of carbon dioxide. Then, unconscious. A higher percentage would cause death. Radiation of atomic particles is perhaps the greatest danger to man in space. Solar flares near active sunspots produce such atomic particles. Others originate outside the solar system. As symbolized here, they move at tremendous speed. When these primary rays strike atoms or molecules of air, both shatter, producing fragments, as shown by this analysis. The fragments, called secondary rays, hit other atoms and molecules. Only a few rays finally reach the ground. For this reason, radiation at ground level is much less severe than the massive radiation in outer space. Whenever primary rays hit the walls of a space vehicle, symbolized by this metal sheet, they break into secondary rays that shower the spaceman inside. Equipment surrounding him can provide only minor protection. Solar activity is continually observed. Therefore, it is always possible to call off a flight if solar activity is unusually high. Weight is another major problem in space travel. On Earth, the weight of a body is caused by the Earth's gravity. When we weigh an object, we measure the force of Earth's gravity on it. The normal force of gravity at the Earth's surface is 1 gravity, or 1 G. Besides gravity, the force of inertia can affect weight. Newton's law states that matter at rest tends to remain at rest. This means that matter resists acceleration. Before takeoff, the rocket and the manned capsule on its top are at rest. This model spaceman will show what happens to the live passenger inside the capsule. When the rocket takes off, it accelerates violently. The man's body resists this acceleration, and the force of this resistance, added to the force of normal gravity, increases his weight. Note the pressure he exerts on the membrane. As the rocket continues to accelerate, the man's weight continues to increase and may reach 9 times the pull of Earth's gravity, or 9 Gs. In orbital flight, when jetting stops, acceleration stops, and all weight disappears. If not strapped down, the spaceman would float freely. For the forward-outward pull created by the speed of the vehicle exactly equals the pull of Earth's gravity. The opposing pulls neutralize each other, causing all weight to disappear. But when the vehicle re-enters the atmosphere, air resistance slows it down, and this deceleration causes the man's weight to return. Newton's law concerning inertia, namely that matter in motion tends to continue in motion, explains why the block continues to move after the vehicle is stopped. So too the man's body tends to speed on as the vehicle decelerates and pushes against the vehicle with about 10 Gs of force. Equipment such as this rocket sled revealed the main problem resulting from violent acceleration and deceleration, which is that blood made heavier by multiple G's would rupture blood vessels just as the liquid breaks this balloon. Weightlessness, the opposite of multi-G's, is another problem, one not well understood. These floating men are in an airplane, flying a curved path whose outward pull equals the inward pull of gravity, thus simulating a capsule in orbit. So far, we have studied the main problems of man's survival in space. Let's begin with a space suit and see how these problems were solved for early space flight. Oxygen coming from a storage tank and pressured at 5 pounds per square inch circulates throughout the suit to cool the spaceman's body and then passes into the helmet for breathing. Exhaled air next leaves the helmet, passing first through chemicals which absorb carbon dioxide, then through a cooler which absorbs heat and condenses water vapor. The air can then be used again. Earlier, we observed the effect of multi-Gs on a liquid inside a balloon. When the balloon is strongly supported, it does not burst. The space suit applies this principle. As G's increase, flexible tubing along the fingers, limbs, and torso is tightly inflated with air to support the blood vessels. Further protection from multi-Gs comes from a contour couch molded to the spaceman's body. It places his heart and brain at the same level. This prevents blackouts caused by blood moving away from the brain, or hemorrhages caused by blood rushing into it. American space capsule designed to re-enter the atmosphere without burning up. Small meteorites are vaporized by the heat generated by compressing the air in front of them at their tremendous speeds. To avoid this danger, the vehicle re-enters the atmosphere with the wide end leading, so that air resistance will slow it down. The dark portion covering the wide end of this capsule is a heat shield. The heat generated by air resistance burns the shield instead of the vehicle. A historic flight is about to begin. We shall see how the solutions to various spaceflight problems work out in actual practice. The worldwide radio system is ready. Vital information on the functioning of the spaceman's body will be automatically transmitted to the radio receivers on Earth. This data and his personal report on the flight will help advance space technology. The vast preparations are now complete. The towering launching rocket majestically takes off and soars spaceward, bearing a man inside the tiny capsule at its tip. As the rocket accelerates, the man's weight increases. About 3 minutes later and 100 miles up, the rocket is in orbit. It aims the capsule toward a predetermined orbital path. The space vehicle jets free. When the jetting ends, weightlessness begins. The vehicle is in orbit at about 17,000 miles per hour. A camera in the vehicle films the spaceman. He swings the vehicle around so that the heat shield faces forward, ready to return at any moment. Below gleams the Earth, where millions anxiously await news of his flight. Moving through the silent darkness of outer space, every moment of the capsule is followed by the network of radio stations. When the retro rockets are fired, orbiting ends. These rockets reduce the capsule's speed and push it downward. The launching rocket, which has been following the vehicle, now passes overhead. The launching rocket will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere in about a week and burn up. The burned-out rockets are cast off to clear the heat shield, which is then positioned to re-enter the atmosphere head-on. Small jets rotate the capsule to disperse air compressed by the wide shield. In the thin upper air, speed decreases gradually. But 15 minutes later, the air thickens perceptibly. The heat shield becomes white-hot, burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Speed decreases from 15,000 miles an hour to 7,500 in just 1 minute. Here, about 25 miles up, the spaceman's weight increases to more than 10 Gs. From this point down, Gs and heat fall off, and the spaceman prepares for a landing. Now the chutes take over the capsule's descent and land it safely in the ocean. It can float indefinitely until picked up by a helicopter, which carries the man and vehicle to a waiting ship and final safety. Space flights such as these are a tribute to the heroism of men like the Russians Yuri Gagarin and German Titov, and the Americans Alan Shepard, Virgil Grissom, and John Glenn, and a triumph for the centuries of scientific research in mathematics, astronomy, and physics, in chemistry and biology, which made possible these first steps into space.
I love early films like that, space exploration, the ones that are thinking about what are the pitfalls and explaining the process. NASA released a bunch of those before all their missions, before the Geminis, or Geminis as they say, before the Apollos, the Mercuries, all that. They would have these reports that would kind of describe with animation like what was going to happen and what the thought was and all that. And it's really kind of fleshes out the whole space program, which I can appreciate. All right, so 1,000 films. So since mid-March, when we started doing these daily lunchtime streaming shows, because of COVID, we've shown at least 1,000 films. We've shown more, but the list isn't complete. Like, I wouldn't list some of the shows that I would do. And so it's definitely more than 1,000 films. But we're just going to celebrate this one and say that this is the 1,000th film. And I should say that I could not have done this without you. I certainly have the equipment. I have, the films, the files, but it's your viewing and your comments that really have made this work for me. And this has been a really quite an amazing kind of silver lining of a dark cloud to be able to spend lunch with you guys and to show these films to you guys. And, this is part of the reason that I collect films, the main reason, which is to show them to you. And so thank you for making this the 1000th film. If it was a situation where I was showing the films and nobody was showing up, I might have stopped at some point. I might have said, like, you know what, I like doing it, but it's a lot of work, so maybe I won't do it. Or I'll do it, like, periodically. But the fact that people showed up and kept showing up, so thank you for that. The other thing is, the fact that people are buying me coffee has been a nice little nudge. It's not enough to live off of, but it's a nice little gesture. And Thomas Talbot, you have been rewarding us every time we show, like, we hit one of these milestones. And so thank you so much for your gracious gifts and giving, and for you tuning in and comments. Your gift was so kind. We'll probably buy more than coffee. I'm trying to boost up the level of webcasting, so I'm trying to invest in more lighting and better webcams, because I'm just using the IMAX webcam and it's almost a piece of garbage. So I'm looking at new ways to kind of make things a little bit better. The films I'm showing are always going to be scratched, and the color's always going to be bad. So no amount of money that you throw at it is going to make it that much better. But I just wanted to say thank you. And I thank you for the likes, and thank you for visiting AV Geeks and buying DVDs. So thank you so much. Now, that being said, this 1000th film, I wanted to show some time ago, but it's a little triggering, but it kind of encapsulates maybe what we all are feeling. I did a how-to show, and I showed films on how to do things like cook meat, how to, what were the other things I showed? How to deliver a baby. I showed sudden birth, in all these different kind of tasks. But this one is basically how to survive a hostage situation. And this film was made in the 70s, and it was made for executives. It was made for people that were being targeted by leftist terrorists, basically, who were supposedly kidnapping, and this was happening in other countries as well, but supposedly this was also happening in some places in the United States, enough so that somebody felt like, we can make this film and sell it, and there'll be a market for it. So this film is fascinating in that regard, because it shows how this person, and it's fictionalized, but it shows how this person survived being locked up by themselves, and how they got through it. And this is kind of loosely related to what I'm feeling, is like we are locked down, and we are kept to ourselves. And, it's very frustrating, but we're surviving it, and we'll get through this. And that's what the takeaway from this film. But it does it in a very novel 70s type of way. So here's surviving hostage situations.
Farrell, you're one of the few people in the world that get a chance to see a replay of their rescue from a kidnapping on TV news.
It looked a hell of a lot better from here than it did while those people had me on the floor of that car.
I'll bet it does. And as I mentioned briefly yesterday, Farrell, I want to integrate your experiences into the company's hostage survival program. Not just what happened, but your feelings at the crucial moments and how you were able to cope with it.
Let's use the kidnap model you use in the training program. It'll give us a frame of reference and keep me on track. It helped me to understand many of the things that happened to me during my captivity. When they grabbed me and we were riding in the car, one of the things that I thought about was what you'd said. A kidnapping isn't a casual decision. They'll know a lot about you and your lifestyle, and they'll know how to use it against you.
Right. We're sure they did surveillance. Some of their photos show how thoroughly they were prepared. The odds of success were in their favor. Obviously, you were shocked.
Yes, but I kept thinking of what would be next. I was sure they were terrorists and would take me somewhere where they would feel safe. I was in real danger. They were nervous, uptight, and might overreact to anything that happened. I had no idea how long they'd hold me.
Did you think about the likelihood of negotiations then?
I wondered what they wanted and how they proposed to get it. I knew my future depended on two things: the negotiations and the relationship I could establish with them. I had confidence in the rest of our people handling the negotiations, so I knew I could put all my efforts into establishing some sort of a rapport with them. Now, as we review the whole thing, it reminds me how important knowing something about it was to me. Looking back, I can see my experience as an incident, an event that had a beginning and an ending.
That's good. Now I suggest we review it in detail.
I'll tell you right off, I was caught short by your pre-event stuff. I had no problem believing that somebody in this company could, maybe would be, picked up by some bunch of guerrillas somewhere. I did not think it would be me, and I had no idea anybody was watching me.
Yeah, but
I just didn't tell security everything I should have. Look, I didn't have my personal stuff sorted out the way I should. Vivian and I had talked about the possibility of this kind of thing. Well, I came home from that briefing, and I told her who to call if I turned up missing. You know, all that kind of thing. But I just didn't get around to updating my will, giving her an up-to-date power of attorney. I just didn't get around to it. And damn it, that bothered the hell out of me while they had me, when I wasn't too worried about my own carcass to think about anything else.
the whole purpose of this is to get others to do it.
I've done it now, too, but after the fact.
What I'd like you to start with is the actual capture.
Well, as you know, and everyone else, too, I guess, I didn't think to tell security about my habit of stopping off Saturday afternoon at Fisher's Farm for fresh vegetables in the summertime. I'd gone through everything else. I knew all this business about not traveling the same routes all the time, switching automobiles, varying the times of travel, keeping down the number of people who knew my plans and schedule, even checked out my golf playing routine, made some adjustments in that. But I didn't say anything about dropping by the farm.
I know. Apparently you don't do that all the time, and you know the area well.
Right. I guess it was May or June that security and I did our survey on my movements. And I never go out there except in midsummer to early fall, and have been going there for the past 4 or 5 years.
It was perfect for their strategy. We know now that they've been watching your Saturdays all summer. But the route directly from the golf course home was too risky for them. Then you set a pattern of going to the farm. 3 weeks is all it took. The 4th Saturday, they moved in.
I still can't piece it all together accurately. It happened too fast. I was totally disoriented. I was petrified. Felt panicky. My mind was filled with images and feelings of what had happened to me. Not clear visualizations, but shadowy ones. Things tumbling together. Darknesses mixed with flashes of clear scenes. I'll never know whether or not I cried out, but I remembered thinking, at least, oh no, not this. And I know I had the thought after that, but they wouldn't really kill me. It's like a dream. I was flat on the floor and couldn't even see daylight through that damn hood. I remember the smell of that damn tarp and that big guy jamming his feet into my back, and what felt like the muzzle of his machine gun. And then they took off. I found that I could hear the total sounds of the tires. And it dawned on me we were riding on blacktop. They had me lying with my head toward the left side of the car. And when we made that first turn after backing out of the farmyard, I was thrown away from the near side and my knees hit the opposite one. I picked up on this then. Felt us turn to the left, onto the service road. Then right, onto the 4-lane highway toward the city. And that sounded different. And then they picked up speed. I knew we were on the highway, just as well as if I could have seen it. I tried to keep track of lefts and rights after we got off the highway, even how long we were on it. My mind was running so fast that it blurred until we arrived at the first house. It's strange how in such a desperate situation you can be thankful over receiving the lesser of two evils. That first house, which sounded empty, was total hell. The big guy kept pushing. I took off my shoes and stripped off my pants. My hands were pinned behind me until the last minute when they cut off the cuffs and they started me up the ladder.
Damn you, move!
My protests were met with threats and a couple of licks in the back with somebody's fists. I made my way up the ladder.
Reach down here and take this!
What felt to my hands like a thin comforter that was really foul-smelling was thrown up after me. I immediately started taking off my blindfold, but by the time I'd done so, the hatch to the room below was closed, and I was alone in the darkness. That was the last contact or sound from my kidnappers. I went over things in my mind as I lay there in the dark. I had little fits of anger, of frustration, and pure fear. I knew where I was, at least roughly. I wasn't more than 30 miles from my home. Just a few hours before, I'd been in my own car. Would have been in my own home in a matter of minutes, and then grabbed. And was my home secure, I wondered. Would they have gone after my family, too? No, I decided. I was the target. I thought about the briefing we'd gone through at the office. The things that had been said about case histories. The statistics from around the world. The odds were that my family was all right. And that I would come out okay, too. But what were they thinking? By now, my wife would know something was wrong. But what? I told you we'd talked about this possibility some. But neither of us had thought it would happen. And always too damn busy. I hadn't done much about the will and the other pre-event preparation. I wondered if she'd remember to call security when I didn't show for dinner.
Security, please. This is Vivian Harkins, Farrell Harkins' wife. My husband is over 4 hours late for dinner. He played golf this afternoon at Mayfair Country Club. Yes, like he always does. Yes, but never this late. Then I'm getting very worried. He asked me to call you if there was any problems. I kept getting these things all tangled in my mind, going from fantasy to what I thought was reality, and probably not doing myself much good.
All this was in those first few hours in the attic?
That's right. I kept telling myself that I had to concentrate on what was happening to me. I figured that they probably didn't intend to kill me, or they would have, back at the farm. And if they wanted a ransom, I was of no use to them dead. Their disguises reinforced my thinking on this point. But what would they do with me? How would I be treated? I remembered the points you made in the briefing about coercive tactics and control techniques used against victims. As I look back, it's almost like they went to your briefing. They didn't miss a trick. The next contact after that was well past the peak of the next day's heat, when they handed up supper, a nearly cold baked potato, some poorly cooked hamburger meat and rice, an overly ripe tomato, and a jar of juice. Please. It's too hot up here. Won't you let me down just long enough to go to the bathroom? No human being should be treated like this, left up here in this oven. Once I thought I heard the woman's voice say, "Tell him he's in his crapper." Otherwise, nothing. They didn't say anything directly to me. It was as if I were a thing, not a person. I was really helpless, dependent, and alone.
Despite that, did you still think they were going to keep you alive?
That's what I wanted to think.
But you were concerned because they were treating you like a thing.
While I was in that attic, I thought I'd be better off if they were seeing me instead of dealing with me as a thing. Later, I was completely convinced of this and tried to build some kind of relationship with my guards, and did adopt the strategy of trying to make the best of whatever happened, at least to the extent of showing them that I could take it, and I was a man, a person with resourcefulness. But truthfully, at the time we were talking about now, I was more concerned with fighting my immediate problems than fighting depression. I held off urinating for a long time, thinking they'd come back soon and let me go to the bathroom. Then I used a place against a wall, as far from the comforter as I could find. Still managed to get it a little wet. The floor tilted that way or something. And I had the problem of my underwear and shirt, thin golf shirt I was wearing, being soaking wet with sweat in that heat. I mean soaking. God, it makes me thirsty just to think about it. But really, the thing that began to get to me was that I couldn't get their attention at all. I wanted to get out of the heat. And I wanted to say that to them. And it was so damn frustrating that I couldn't. I got angry. I got scared. How long could I last if they abandoned me? I got angry again. Tried to calm down, and I would for a bit, and then I was at it again, flailing about, trying to get their attention. I remember putting my face right up to the hatch to the room below and pleading as calmly as I knew how to be let out.
Hello,
I complained of stifling air and heat, being thirsty, and having to go to the toilet. I got no response. I raised my voice and raised it more, and still no response.
You gotta let me out.
I beat on the door. I beat louder
Stand it. It's
until
too
my
hot.
hands hurt. I pounded on it with my foot, but with no success. I worked at it with my fingers, trying to get it open, and cut them on nails and a sharp splinter. I got nowhere. I made myself lie still, trying to count seconds and minutes. Then I tried again. Man, I was tired. I finally decided I should try to sleep. Again, dimly remembering the survival breathing. At one point, I wondered if it were morning, and I lay still, listening for sounds. I heard an automobile pass by outside. Later, a second one. Once I thought I heard some voices, but then decided that I hadn't. Nothing. And certainly none of the morning sounds we were told about. Birds early bustling around and so on. Somehow after that first night, they had taken my watch, or first morning. I became terribly confused on time and actually overcompensated in my mind. I decided it was Sunday when they got me down from the attic. And when I was left alone and quiet for a while, a bit later, I imagined going to church. Even tried to count off the steps from the street in my head, so on. Somewhere in all of this, I overheard a loud argument about moving me. One, a woman's voice, and at least two men. The majority of it was that they should get me down.
Harkins, put that
They told me to put the hood on my head. And then they guided me to the ladder.
Come on down.
A couple of people's hands on me. I used my own hands and arms for part of it.
It's right there. That's it.
And then I was down.
Please, I've got to go to the bathroom. Give me his pants. Give me his pants.
Damn. I must have been some picture standing there in my dirty underwear with that black hood over my head. But I didn't think about it. I just asked to go to the bathroom.
What you put in there, Harkins?
I guess I'll tell you about this next part. Maybe you can help somebody else with it.
There you go. Lift your foot
It
up.
was the most degrading part of the incident. Somebody led me about a dozen steps, I guess.
Lift the other foot.
At least a couple of people, it seemed like, were tramping along, too. I bumped into them and a door frame on the way. Whoever was closest when we got there obviously misunderstood my problem. I was guided to the bowl, and my shorts were jerked down. I shuffled around awkwardly, and then they were laughing. I heard a man's voice say, "Wait a minute, let him alone if he pisses on himself," and then they all laughed. And then that woman said, "The stupid ass will piss all over the place. Here, sit down like a woman and do it." I'm sure it was her that spun me around and sat me down, still with that damn hood over my face. I sat there on that pot, trying to turn my head squarely towards those smirking faces, and said, "A human being ought to be left alone to do this anyway." There was more laughter. They cut the cuffs off. There was the sound of a door closing. During that time, I took the hood off my head, and while I had it off, I looked around to see if I dared try for a window.
I was going to ask you about your thoughts on escaping.
As I looked up at the window, even though it was small and boarded, I was really tempted, but several factors worked against it. All three of my captors were armed and gave the impression that they would not hesitate to use any form of violence. And although I had been in good shape when I was grabbed, the 2, or was it 3 days in that damn attic, and the kind of mental shock they got me into, all these factors seemed to work against it. I also remembered some of your comments in the training program about bucking the odds. All in all, I figured I had a better chance by playing their game, even with the misery and humiliation. As mundane as it sounds, those few minutes in that toilet were a turning point for me. It was cooler. I could see cracks of light through the window. I had relieved myself. I knew I was caught in the middle of a situation where I had no control. My general manager role was useless, even an impediment. I was completely dependent on these people. My family, law enforcement, the company, might be doing everything possible to locate me and get me out safely. But there was no way I could help except to stay alive. I was determined to survive, get some kind of order out of the chaos of these first few days, set some goals for myself, and learn more about these people who were holding me.
What'd they do next?
They cuffed me again and led me out of that dump to the car, and we were off to my second prison, a definite improvement. In the basement prison of that second house, I wasn't tied up at all. There were 4 guards. All wore Walt Disney character masks. I called them by the names their masks suggested, with an open smile at times. I remembered that thing we were told about avoiding treating terrorist women as women. You said they would usually be trying to out-macho the men, and I saw it happen many times. When I finally got a chance to take a bath out of the broken-down laundry sink there in the basement, I had a woman guard in the room with me, and I just did it. I was so filthy, and I just stripped off and washed as if I were completely alone. I had a bucket in the basement as a toilet. It was all I ever had to use there. It became just a routine, and the guards came to give me the token privacy of busying themselves with something else when I was defecating.
Were you ever aware of the negotiations?
Only vaguely. I knew there was trouble over the ransom demands, particularly the food giveaways, but they kept me in the dark on details, except when they lost their tempers or were fighting among themselves. I didn't discuss any of the issues with them to avoid being a party to a negotiation that was obviously going badly. They asked me personal questions several times. You know, the validation procedures.
Were you able to work on your physical conditioning in the basement cell?
Absolutely. I think this was one of the most important aspects of my personal survival program. I try to stay in good shape. I had to adjust to lousy food and a very confined living space. I even suffered a few attacks of diarrhea. After you handed out the Canadian Air Force program at our survival briefing, I worked it into my daily routine at home and continued it religiously during my captivity. It really works well in confined spaces. I also did isometrics. I guess I had the smallest jogging course in history. I couldn't measure time, of course, but I did the equivalent of about 5 miles a day running in place, moving the length of the cell along the 8-foot dimension.
How about mental conditioning?
That area was more difficult. I told you about goal setting earlier. I tried not to focus on possible release dates, the negotiation problems, or what my family was doing. I spent a lot of time developing my new daily routine. I had a calendar on the wall, and I ticked off the days with reasonable accuracy. Mealtime, even though the food was terrible, was a very significant event. And my captors were reasonably consistent because they ate around the same time. I cleaned my room daily as best I could. Even the toilet routine was disciplined and scheduled into my day. Looking back now, it's hard to believe that such trivia assumed such importance in my new life. I spent a lot of time working on business problems, inventing new products, developing their marketing plans, imagining competitive reaction to my strategies. Boredom became a real problem, and I was determined to fight it. Easier said than done, by the way.
What about your relations with the terrorists?
Actually, I was on reasonably friendly terms with only one of them, and even that relationship was tenuous. There were times when I thought he was a little sympathetic with my plight. And that was usually when he was on guard alone, and we talked about our most common interest, chess. He warmed to that. But he was also proud of having a political science degree, and sometimes he would get it into his mind to grill me on politics. When he did, I could feel the animosity build up. He was the smallest of the men who guarded me, probably the youngest, and I decided the most idealistic. When he got into politics, he came on like a true fanatic. It was obviously a dangerous area as far as his attitude toward me was concerned, and I always tried to steer him out of it as quickly as I could.
You're afraid to talk politics with me. You're a capitalist, and you know you're on the wrong side of the struggle.
Politics are your specialty, not mine. It's not something we can discuss equally as we can chess. I was lucky on that one. He cooled off, and we eventually got around to our common interest, chess. It was a lot safer than politics and capitalism. I tried to avoid being a hero or a winner in these situations. I knew damn well my company didn't give out Purple Hearts. I asked him for a paper and pencil repeatedly. Finally, he agreed, and that's when I started my journal. Keeping it helped hold me together. You may be interested in it for the training.
Yeah. I was glad the police recovered it when they found the second safe house.
Toward the end, I found myself developing some bonds with my captors, not just Pinocchio. As days turned into weeks, I had the feeling we were all in the same boat. I resented the freedom enjoyed by my family and friends. Where were the police with all their investigative skills? And if they found us, would they come in with guns blazing and kill us?
That's a normal reaction, Farrell. It's odd how your perception of the outside gets twisted.
It sure is. And I didn't come completely out of it for some time after my unintended release. That all started as another move that came as a shock to me, and I wasn't prepared for it. I had grown relatively comfortable in my cell and in my new life. 5 weeks is a long time in a confined area and in my incredibly narrow life. It must have come as a surprise for my guards, too. For a moment, I thought it was all over. It was such a change of pace. I figured the negotiations had dried up and that they were going to eliminate me. Frankly, I was terrified.
Hurry up.
They dumped me in the back seat again. We went racing off. They were talking and not paying much attention to me. They were talking about avoiding the police. They did just the opposite. They ran right into them.
Apparently, a roadblock had been set up for a burglary murder suspect, and these people ran into it. The police had no idea they were dealing with your kidnappers.
I can tell you, it happened very quickly. Right after we made the turn, the driver slammed on his brakes, and we skidded to a stop. The woman shouted they should run for it. And you know the rest.
Hooray, he escaped. So it's a fascinating film because it is definitely of a time, and somebody asked in the comments about, like, was this enough of a problem that it warranted having a film made about it? And that's what the way I view a lot of educational films is. I run across a film and I'm like, wow, this was enough of a problem that somebody spent time and money and resources to make it. And I guess so. I mean, there was a time that executives were being kidnapped, especially in other countries. That was a problem. And this was a way to talk about it. And obviously it refers to other things. So this would probably be part of a, security team would come in to a large corporation and they would have a training, like, series of workshops. And they would give them that Canadian Armed Forces manual, and they would talk about these different things. And there's a whole regimen of things that they would have these executives do. But it's a wonderful film, and somebody noticed it was Motorola distributed it. Motorola, the company that made police and still makes police radios. This was part of their Motorola Training Institute. They distributed a lot of educational films, not only on how to use their equipment, which, was, complex and had lots of issues, lots of things to teach people, but they also, since they had an in with law enforcement, they also distributed lots and lots of police training films. And they didn't necessarily make them themselves, but they did bring in other people. So, Roriner, I can't pronounce that. The people that made that last film made a lot of police training films, of which I have in my collection. Some of them are too intense and triggering. I mean, this itself is fairly triggering. But the key is this. We are hostages to this stupid virus, and we will survive it together. So that's my takeaway of that, is that, we might be locked in an attic in our dirty underpants, but we will get through this together. I don't know. That's my takeaway. But thank you, Colin, for the coffee. We'll get through this with coffee. One of the things I do like is the fact that there is this kind of chatter amongst the people that come to my screenings, and there is this kind of support going on in the comments. And so I very much appreciate how supportive you guys are to yourselves and to other people that are having rough times. That's what this is about. It's about sharing and support and watching old 60 millimeter films and kind of processing what we're seeing and thinking about them and things like that. But as a thank you, we'll play this again. My wife commissioned this work, and so here it is.
I can check that gear in a minute, so don't touch anything, okay? Hey! Get down from there! Now!
if it bumped that control by accident? You'd be mincemeat by now. What have I told you? You don't work on equipment when the engine's running.
Well, I told him not to touch anything. All right, I guess I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking? You mean you'll work on engines and machinery and not think of your own personal safety? Here. Shake hands with danger.
Shake hands with danger. Meet a man you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety. Now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. I was young and feisty. Never did things by the book. Just let me get my toolbox and I'll take myself a look. I climbed up on a dozier with my mechanic's pride. Said, you can keep it running, friend, while I poke around inside. Shake hands with danger, meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety, now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. Although I learned a lesson, I forgot it soon enough. The nicks and burns and scratches showed the young ones I was tough. Till another morning I was grinding on some steel. My other hand got careless and fed my skin into the wheel. Shake hands with danger, step right up and say hello. Grinding wheels and metal are what made me Three-Fingered Joe. I've seen mechanics burning and I've seen them take a fall just to save themselves a minute. I've seen them lose it all. I've watched them courting trouble, seen them take a chance and lose. They get careless for a moment and spend a lifetime with the blues. Shake hands with some friends I used to know. Compared to them, I'm lucky to be just Three-Fingered Joe.
All right, we'll end it with an evil laugh, a maniacal laugh that makes light of dangerous accidents that happen repairing safety equipment that has a good beat. Tomorrow, we'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully, I won't have to show another 1,000 films, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll come up with a reason to do this when the pandemic clears. And it's because it's been a lot of fun, and it's been great to see everybody. So we'll see you again tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Everybody take care. Rewind. Please rewind and love each other. Bye.